everybody's here. Without further ado, I'm just going to jump right into this, and if you would save your questions to the end, there'll be an opportunity for you to type them into that little question box, and we'll field them as best we can, and certainly I'll respond to any questions that are emailed directly to me. So the topic for today is making the community connection, parishioner engagement, and parish communications. And you know, my goal today is to take you through some of the ideas that we have around parish communication and sort of the general understanding that a parish that communicates well, a parish that is using modern methods of communication, is a parish that's going to be helping build engagement, a parish that's connecting with its parishioners. And certainly some of this applies to the diocese, but largely you'll see that this is geared to parishes, but also relevant to dioceses, and certainly relevant to dioceses as you work with your parishes. So communication as a way to help build an engaged parish. And we understand that engagement requires far more than good communication, but it does start there in part. Engaged parishioners are key to the strength and growth of your parish's stewardship mission. Parish communications make or break parishioner engagement. In order to have an engaged parish, we need to have a two-way dialogue. We need to be able to get our message out to our parishioners to make sure that they understand what the goals of our parish are and what the activities and events and different faith organizations that are available to them, and also they to receive their feedback and their involvement. And we know that the more effective that two-way communication is, that engagement increases. So parish communications do make or break parishioner engagement. And I'm going to open this and then close this talk with a quote from Pope Francis. Communications and the church. Keeping the doors of our churches open also means keeping them open in the digital environment so that people, whatever their situation in life, can enter, and so that the gospel can go out and reach everyone. We are called to show that the church is the home of all. Are we capable of communicating the image of such a church? Communication is a means of expressing the missionary vocation of the entire church. One way to experience this call, to discover the beauty of faith, the beauty of encountering Christ. So that is sort of our opening. Let's dive into really sort of some nuts and bolts ways that parishes and dioceses can communicate with their parishioners, some techniques and tactics that are working in other areas, and just some general discussion about parish engagement. Communications in the church. 8 points for better Catholic communication. Number one, communication is rooted in God. I mean, this is nothing there's nothing new here. I mean, communication is a fundamental part of our faith. The way we communicate doesn't work very well. Now, I mean, I'm painting with a broad brush here, but I think it's a pretty fair statement that if we were to go to most parishes, and to some degree dioceses, although dioceses are a little bit further ahead, that our parishes are not doing a great job communicating. They're not actively, and again, in a broad brush, not actively participating on Facebook, not actively emailing their parishioners, maybe a parish newsletter, not using the bulletin to good effect. The bulletin hasn't changed a lot in 90% of the parishes that we visit in 50 years, and it's a fantastic communication tool if people just view it that way. And not using, to some degree, some of the modern communication techniques, like Twitter and some of these other methods for communicating. So I don't know that we're doing a great job in communicating. And again, there certainly are some examples of parishes and dioceses that are. If we fail to communicate well, people will walk away. One of the things, there's a lot of reasons why people have drifted from the church, and certainly communication isn't the only one. But one of the things I think we can discover, with some of our evangelical churches, is that they are doing a better job of getting the word out, at communicating, of inviting people to participate in their faith communities, and and welcoming new families as they move to the area, and then of course communicating with them once they're there. Putting their services online and having email distribution lists and active newsletters and engaging their youth, through different methods and tactics, using social media. If we don't use those tools, we're going to continue to lose people for a variety of reasons. But some of them will be, we'll lose them to people that are just doing a better job at connecting with our folks. We need to be in a dialogue in an open environment. Certainly our church has done a great job, or an improving job in the last 6, 8, 10 years. But we do need to have an open dialogue with our parishioners. This doesn't necessarily need to be a top-down, talking at people, telling them what to do or what's going on, but to have a two-way dialogue and to elicit feedback from the parishioners. Let's humanize modern communication. One of the things social media has done, for better or for worse, it has set an expectation that communication should have an element of humanity to it. It should be more personal It should be more intimate, or could be, and it may be even more conversational. It doesn't have to be, quote, official all the time. It should have an element of realness to it, of a human element to it. And I think our parishes and our dioceses should take some hints from that. Take the gospel as a guide. Certainly, we have some good sources that we could look to and pull from as we craft our communication strategies, and as we think about what we're going to be talking about or what we're inviting people to participate in. The gospel certainly serves as a guide for that. Tools alone won't cut it. We need witnesses, right? So we're going to talk a lot about tools today, the different communication channels that are available to a parish, but that's not enough. We need people to witness. We need to call upon our parishioners, to call upon our youth to participate, to get up and lead, and to whether it's speaking at mass, or whether it's leading a youth group, or leading a group in the church basement, or taking the initiative to be the author of the newsletter and to speak in their voice, to witness their faith, and to be an active part. This whole talk is not geared around all of the things that the pastor, parish, business manager, development director, marketing person should be doing at the parish or diocesan level. It's about helping you have tools to facilitate what needs to happen at the parish level. So we need to keep that in mind. We can't do it all on our own, or certainly you can't. Be hopeful. New Catholic communication is already happening. I mean, the whole talk is geared about things that you can and should be doing, and most of this talk was built by looking at examples of where it's already happening. You'll see examples in parishes and dioceses where this stuff is working and is being effective. So we're not asking, or I'm not proposing that people do something that's impossible. There are parishes and dioceses all across the country that are proving that not only is it possible, that it's flourishing, that you really can increase communication, and by doing that, really facilitate better engagement. Growing an engaged church. I mean, the whole talk is built on communication strategies to help build an engaged church, and maybe an obvious question, but why? I mean, what's the big deal about having an engaged church and engaged parishioners? And I think that some of these bullets should fill in the blanks there. Belonging deepens our believing. Engagement is a sense of belonging to a family, an emotional bond that develops between members and their parish community. It's not just about showing up. It's about participating. It's about being active. It's about being bonded to a community. And you only do that when you're engaged, when you're actively engaged in it and invested in it emotionally, spiritually, and physically in terms of what you're doing. When we are engaged, we are passionate about our parish's mission and about communal life. Involvement and engagement. Involvement is not engagement. What I mean by that is involvement is what you do at your church, what you do when you show up there. Engagement is how you feel about your church, what your connection to the church is, what your connection to your faith is, what your emotional and personal investment is in your faith and in your church. Engagement is about belonging and making a difference. Spirituality deepens as engagement grows. And I think some of these are somewhat obvious, but I think worth taking a look at. It's not just necessarily the most active people at church that are the most engaged. It's not necessarily about how busy you are and how many committees you sign up for, but it's about developing those bonds and communication, but one leg of the stool, but an important one. I believe this study was commissioned by Gallup maybe 2 or 3 years ago, but it was an analysis of engagement across our church. And they determined that 21% of the people registered in churches today, or at least in the churches they surveyed, were engaged. 49% not engaged, and I'm going to define these in just a minute, at least as Gallup defined them, and 30% actively disengaged. It's a pretty scary category. Engaged. So how do you define engaged? Attend Mass regularly. This should be pretty obvious. Invite others to parish activities. You're reaching out to your own personal community and trying to get them involved and participating and joining you, at your church or at your parish. Give generously of their time, talent, and treasure, really of all free, and have a strong and healthy emotional connection to the parish. The big one. 49% not engaged, and we always want to have some optimism. That's what this talk's based on. It's based on improving things. This 49%, and we all who work in the church, know this group well, have sporadic Mass attendance, rarely or never invite others, limited sharing of time, talent, treasure, maybe engaged at one level, but not at others, or periodically engaged. less connected emotionally. Maybe the people that go to church because they feel obligated to, not necessarily because they want to or feel that it's an important part of their their day, or they go because they want to show an example for their kids, but maybe not so emotionally connected as they perhaps should be. And then the one that I think is really the toughest nut to crack, if you will, which are the actively disengaged. And this would be attend Mass 2 or 3 times a year, or really not at all. I mean, I think that was a little optimistic with the 2 or 3 times a year. Share little or no time, talent, and treasure, and generally unhappy with the parish, maybe unhappy with their faith or the church, and I think generally unconnected emotionally, really just not connected at all. It's that 49% that the disengaged that I think was where the real progress can happen. Not necessarily that we want to cross off these actively disengaged, but the other ones I think might be a little bit easier to reach. So we talk about communication and communication fostering engagement. So how do you start? What do you do? And I think you need to have a strategy, right? So in order to have a strategy, you need to define your target audience. And we have some suggestions here, and I'm sure you can come up with many, but it's not just about shouting loudly from the tallest mountain, although I would accept that as a good first start. But I think the more effective communication strategies tend to be the ones that are more focused on a specific audience with specific goals and with specific outcomes. So a message crafted or a communication strategy crafted toward teens and youth is going to look vastly different than one targeted toward seniors. You're going to use different channels, different methods, and a different voice. Hopefully, be using voices of the teens. Broader community, reaching out to people not necessarily part of the church. That's an entirely different set of communication tools, a different voice as well, a different invitation, and measured differently than maybe a program for young adults. So, and we're not suggesting how you should target your audience. It's different. Different parishes have different needs and goals. I mean, there are parishes in parts of the country that are growing rapidly as people move to the south and southwest and parts of Colorado and California. You've got rapidly growing parishes, and so that might be more of a young adult and youth outreach effort. And then you've got certainly areas where the church might be a little bit older here in the Northeast, that maybe you're more focused on seniors and what have you. So I think it's up to you, but I think it's important to take away from this slide. You need to define it. You need to figure out who you're trying to talk to. The more specifically you target your audience, the more your message will resonate. And needless to say, if you know who you're talking to and you craft a message specifically for them, that you have a better chance of it being well received versus just a general message targeted to everybody. And if you target to everybody, you're really not speaking to anybody. Start small. It's easier to gauge the effectiveness of your message to a smaller group. Expand it later if needed. And this really just is a suggestion. If your parish, is just putting the bulletin out there and has a website that you haven't updated, not dynamic, and that's about the extent of your parish communication, or if you're at the diocesan level, if most of your parishes fall in that category, I think it might be a little too much to hit them with this grand strategy of engagement and communication. Start small. Start with maybe just the young adults, or start with maybe just the seniors, and expand it later as you get better at it. Speak with a credible voice. And I think this is one we need to think about in the church. Involve representatives from your primary audience in the campaign. I speak at a lot of finance and parish councils, and they tend to have a very similar demographic. Council to council to council, and maybe that's okay for that particular group. But certainly, as you're crafting a communication strategy, all you have to do is have a teenager in the family to know that they're sort of speaking in a different language and using different channels to communicate. And certainly, a family with young kids come at things from a different perspective. They're more interested in how the church is reaching out to their kids and CCD and youth programs and what have you. And I think we need voices from those communities as we're building our communication plans, and not just again people to speak at Mass or to give the announcements, but whose voice you want to capture in your written materials or in your Facebook posting or in your tweets. This all can be monitored by a committee or the pastor or the diocese in some levels, but I think we need to trust good people to do good work for us from the audiences that we're trying to talk to. And then remember your secondary audience. Even a small campaign has a ripple effect. Example, if your audience is teens, the parents, are the secondary audience. I mean, I think it's not dissimilar to, we all spend I don't know about you, but I do a lot of times, Saturdays and Sundays, standing at the soccer field, watching my kids run around and kick a little ball, and that's because, they've invited us there. That's what they're interested in, what they're doing, and, we're the secondary audience, but we're there all the time. And I think that goes in both directions. That, messages to the teens, more involvement and engagement from our teens, will bring the parents along as well. And I think the secondary audience, I won't say it matters as much, but we need to think about it. Set a clear engagement goal. How do you know you're succeeding if you don't have a goal? You have to know, where you're headed. What's the goal here? And we just a few suggestions. Get teens more involved, bring families together, increase mass attendance and participation. Reached out to lapsed Catholics. I mean, I don't know that we're doing a whole bunch, in terms of just communication. And I think, again, it's not just about it, but that's what this talk is about. And reaching out to Catholics that have drifted or fallen away. And increased mass attendance and participation. I certainly think our Pope is helping with that, but I think communication, we could help him a little bit by being better communicators. But we need to set a goal. Determine how you will measure success. It can be quantifiable. So if your goal is, we'd like to invite people, maybe we've got 300, 400 families that don't participate. Let's build a communication effort to reach out to them and see if we can get some of them back. You could have a quantifiable goal. We'd like to get 5 or 10 people who haven't, darkened our doors to darken our doors, to come across, and visit with us. But it also could be qualifiable. Noticeably higher enthusiasm, better morale. The qualifiable ones tend to be more fun. A little bit easier to measure sometimes. Good communication, effective communication. Actively participating youth, people that are excited. Bring new enthusiasm, and that's a perfectly good goal. Perfectly good. Choose your message. What should your goal matter to your primary audience? Why should your goal matter to your primary audience? Well, it should matter because if you don't have a goal, you don't know what you're trying to affect. You don't know what you're trying to create. So, if you start with a goal in mind, you can sort of back up from there and build your message. What message of invitation will they respond best to? Certainly a 16-year-old is going to respond differently than a 45-year-old or a 65-year-old. They're going to respond to different messages in different channels. How does your audience receive communications, and what are they most likely to respond to? And one of our suggestions is going to be don't necessarily prejudge the channels. I've given this talk at a few places, and when I first started giving it, people would resist Facebook a little bit. And there was a thing for the kids and what have you. Well, the fastest growing segment on Facebook are people over the age of 65. And that's been the fastest growing segment for the last 2 years. And one of the fastest decreasing segments on Facebook are the youth. So I think we should be careful not to bring our own judgment to some of these. We need to think about these channels. Lots of people are using them. Different communication methods. I mean, some of these are obvious, but a letter, a phone, email, text, social media, and then multi-channel. Most good communication strategies use several of these. And then you need to capture information. You need to create a system, and we see very few parishes doing this, to capture email addresses, to capture cell phone numbers so you can text. These are not intrusive methods. I don't know the last time I was offended when I received an email from an organization that I cared about. It's not an offensive thing to do. And even with cell phones, that needs to be permission-based if you're going to text. But once someone gives permission, as long as you don't abuse that privilege, it becomes very effective. And boy, I think 3, 4, 5% of the parishes that we work with are actively collecting those channels, and they become very, very powerful once you do. Don't just plan, implement, measure, and evaluate responses. How will you know you've succeeded? What will you have learned, and what will you do next time? I mean, standard stuff for improving. So where are we so far? We're about to jump in our presentation to a different segment. So take a little bit of attendance about where we are now. So one thing that I think it's fair to say, 20 minutes into this, is that communication is important. I think new tools and new methods are effective and appropriate for churches to use. Almost every diocese in the country has a social media policy. I don't know of any diocese, I'm sure someone will put one in here after I said this, that forbids it. Our advice would be to consult your diocese, find out what your social media policy is, Facebook and Twitter and even Instagram, and then try to develop your strategy and use those tools. They are effective. They are being used at diocesan levels and at parish levels, and being used well. I don't think there's any reason to think somehow that these new methods are inappropriate for churches. Yet we see that quite a bit. We don't see churches using email, text, Facebook, Twitter to communicate. An engaged parish is filled with people passionate about mission and communal life. We knew that before we tuned in here, but we did have a slide that said it. And I think it's fair to say we want engaged parishes. I don't know that anybody would say that we want parishes that are disengaged or God forbid actively disengaged. We want people engaged in what we're doing. It makes for a better parish, a better community. Most of our parishioners are either actively disengaged or not engaged, right? So 21% engaged. The rest are somewhere toward disengaged or even actively disengaged. So we've got a lot of work to do. And again, communication is a part of it, but it's an essential and necessary part of it. We need a strategy. Strategy should have a target audience. Who are you going to be talking to? A credible voice. Don't forget about adding additional voices to the mix beyond just the pastor, business manager, diocesan official. We need voices from our communities, and we need their help. We can't do this without them. A measurable goal. I think it's discouraging to launch a program, not to set a goal and then to feel that you're failing just because you haven't been keeping score. I think you'd be surprised to see that maybe you're not failing if you've set a reasonable goal and you're measuring that. Build effective messaging. Keep good data. You can't communicate to people who you don't know how to reach, and then develop the appropriate communication methods. The toolbox. So what can you do? What's in your toolbox for communication? It wouldn't be it would be wrong of me not to at least touch a little bit on envelopes because everybody has them. Every parish is using envelopes. You've all made investments at varying levels, and they are a useful communication tool, and they should be viewed thusly. And so is e-giving. You are communicating with these, and I think people all too often think that, well, this is just about fundraising and money, and sure, it is in part about that, and there's nothing wrong with that either. But if you are making these investments, I think that you need to look, or at least I would suggest, that you look at the different ways you can communicate via these methods that you already have. Envelopes and e-giving don't just carry offertory gifts. They're not just offertory delivery systems. Every envelope company in the country has the ability to have custom messaging on your envelopes, to include pastoral letters in your envelope kits, to have Christmas and Easter outreach pieces at very reasonable costs. This is available across the country, and all too often we see parishes that view their envelopes simply as the gift wrap, if you will, or the delivery system for the $10 or the $15. And I think that's short-sighted given the necessity that we all face of increasing communication. So I think don't overlook those. Regular envelope users give more of their time, talent, and treasure. Envelope users are more engaged overall, and you can personalize all these pieces as well. You can use them as a communication tool. E-giving the same. Switching from an annual box set to monthly mail, and all we're talking about here is increasing the frequency of your communication. So if you're going to be doing this anyway and creating this delivery system for your offering, a case can be made from the communication side of the aisle and the fundraising side that increasing the frequency for which you use these tools will increase responsiveness and create a better channel for communication. Plus, it creates that vehicle for a pastoral letter, that vehicle for a Christmas and Easter mailing, that vehicle for an announcement of a special event coming, or a parish carnival or fair. If you're making this investment anyway, we would strongly encourage you to think about all the other ways you can use it. E-giving allows your parishioners to participate in your parish life, stewardship activities anywhere and any time, and we're seeing e-giving solutions become more robust to allow for two-way communication, email, to allow for people to participate and register for events. Again, just if you think a little bit outside the box about these investments you've already made, I think you'll discover that there's some additional use you can get out of them as it relates to communication. Your parish bulletin. This one happens to be a personal pet peeve of mine, but your parish bulletin. Every other nonprofit, and our parishes are nonprofits, every other nonprofit in the country would virtually die for the ability to hand deliver a newsletter to their parishioners and to their donors and their supporters every week. Yet, in our church, we use the bulletin the same way we've always used it. We get it. At least a lot of parishes, we get it free. We've got all this advertising in the back, which is okay, but we need that because it's free. But we trade a lot of pages, for that freeness to advertising. And then we have relatively stale content in there and it's the same content all the time. And you know, the parish bulletin, again, you've made an investment at the very least of time and effort and maybe money. It can and should be used more robustly and more dynamically. It's absolutely crazy not to. Your parish bulletin can and should be more interesting, creative. It is a dynamic communication tool. It's not being used that way, but it is. It is your parish bulletin. Is the content specific to you, or is it generically produced with just the mass schedule? Is it in color? Is it visually engaging and easy to navigate? Is it inviting to those who are not engaged? This is the kind of piece that somebody who maybe was visiting for a baptism, registered in the church, but visiting for a baptism, who hasn't been there in a while, would actually want to read and look through. Is it available online, and do you update that weekly? Do you ever email it? I wouldn't email many of the ones that I've seen, but if you're improving it, you should be emailing it. Can it be viewed easily on mobile devices, smartphones and tablets? Things can be optimized for iPads and for smartphones, and they should be. Again, this newsletter, I mean, you're investing time, money, and effort every week to produce this content. A little bit additional effort, and you can really make it sing for your parish. Don't waste the bulletin. I would say 85% of the parishes, that might be a little high, but a vast percentage of the parishes that I see on a regular basis are. Parish website. This is all about communication, right? So a dynamic parish website is a necessity, not an option. And again, more and more parishes are on board with this, but not enough. What most parish websites offer, and if your parish website offers this, fine. But what most parish websites offer are mass times, information on parish ministries and contacts. You know, call the business manager, call the parish secretary. Links to the school or CCD program. Hopefully, a downloadable copy of the Sunday bulletin, sacramental schedules, and maybe some bio information on the staff. It's what's not there that hurts. What's missing? Parishioners and non-parishioners are increasingly turning to your website that you just might not have. Miscommunication opportunities frustrate engagement. If somebody moves to your community and they want to be a participant in your parish, and they drive by, they find out what church they're supposed to belong to, and they log on to a website, and it hasn't been updated, or it's the same basic template that's been there since 1998, you're sending a message. You're sending a message that this isn't a parish that values modern communication channels. This isn't a parish that's investing in actively and proactively communicating with its parishioners. And you're sending a message that maybe this is not a particularly engaged parish. And I hate to say it, but the evangelical church that's 5 miles up the street is doing all of that. They're doing those things. They are using these channels. And again, we're leaving the ball on the 20-yard line here. We've all built websites. You all have them. In some levels, you all update them, but maybe we're not doing enough. What should a website be? It should be dynamic. It should be engaging. And, some of these basics. You should have a mission statement that describes the parish community life, and what I could expect as a member of this parish. What's the fabric of this place? It should have directions to the parish with an interactive map, including a map of the parish plant if you've got a significant facility. But I mean, real easy. I can't tell you how many parish websites, as somebody that has to drive to them quite a bit, that you have to hunt around for to figure out where the address is. That's not particularly inviting. That's not good communication. Very, very easy to include these interactive maps. Google will do it for you. Interactive forms that allow people to register membership online. And I know that may seem to be a bridge too far, but it's certainly very doable. Or at least get the process started. Download the forms and maybe bring them in if that's part of your parish requirement. But I think that we could be pushing or providing more of this material to our parishioners, or maybe our prospective parishioners. Interactive parish calendar that can be updated by multiple members of the staff, as well as key volunteers. If your decision is to put an interactive calendar up there and have just Father and the business manager have the ability to update it, I would suggest you don't do it because nobody will update it frequently enough. I mean, if you're going to have an interactive calendar, it needs to be current. Nothing worse than logging onto a website, finding a calendar, and find out that it's 3 years old. That sends a very, very strong message as well. Ability to have online registration for parish events. This isn't hard stuff anymore. Downloadable forms for sacramental preparation. Again, not difficult. There are parishes all across the country doing this. Potentially a password-protected area for councils, committees, ministry groups to share information, post and feedback. The ability to donate online. E-giving tools. Not just for offertory, but for events and for registration. A visitors page. I think a very small number of parishes Have a page that's specifically crafted to visitors, people that are not necessarily members yet. And I think a warm welcome to visitors, somebody that for whatever reason has happened to land on your page or searched out your page, is a good idea. A page for welcoming home returning Catholics or people that are thinking about returning. And I think that most people who have drifted from the church that think about returning, they put their toe in the water first. Because it's a deeply personal decision. It's a scary decision. And I think a parish that has acknowledged that this is a personal journey for people and says, if you're thinking about returning, here's a warm welcome for you, and here's maybe the path. And that's what good communication is about. And people will reciprocate. They will appreciate it. And then pages for children, young, youth adults, families, and seniors. I would say fewer than 1% of the parish websites I've been on will get that granular with this. Some really good examples of what parishes are doing. Dynamic, engaging parish website, podcasts or print version of Father's Sunday homily. This webinar that we're doing today, we're recording and we're going to email out to you the ability to print out the slides and to listen to the audio of it and watch the slides. It's not hard, and it's very doable. And again, you have people that, with bad weather, who are ill, that can't make it to church. It's a real service. It's good communication to provide them that ability. It helps build engagement. A blog maintained by the priest, deacon, DRE, youth minister. These are things we talked about, capturing the voice of the audience. Well, we need to give them a place to have a voice. I mean, Father has a voice every Sunday, and that's important, of course. That's essential. That's what it's all about. But, what about the youth minister? What about the religious education director? What about the music minister? Where do we give them the ability to have a voice? What about the head of a volunteer committee? And potentially forums for comments and discussion. The ability to submit prayer requests or purchase mass cards. Again, certain websites or certain parishes are doing these things. Resources and links for ongoing spiritual formation. I think with this and bilingual content, with this extensive list, you can see that websites can and should be a tool. People will sit there and say, well, why invest? Nobody comes to them. Well, that's a chicken or an egg discussion. If your website is stale and static and I visit it once, I get whatever relevant information I need, the phone number, and in 10 seconds I realize there's no reason ever to come back, then it will be stale and static and no one will ever visit it. But if it's dynamic, if there's content there that I can engage with, if you're providing a service to me, the ability to download forms or interact with people, then I've got a reason to go back. And there's no magic to it. It's very doable. And one of the things we have as a church is we have built-in audiences that show up at our every Saturday and Sunday that all live basically in the same area of town. We have their names and addresses in their mailing lists, yet we don't take advantage of some of these sort of basic channels. What online engagement opportunities are you missing? What aren't you doing? Email. A good number of parishes are gathering email addresses, but we don't see them actively doing it. We ask for them sometimes and are unable to receive them. Email is one of the most expensive methods to communicate with your parishioners. It's widely accepted as a form of mass and personal communication. Again, when email rises to the level of spam, it's a problem. But our parishes aren't emailing at all, or very, very little anyway. And I think that if we're talking to the engaged or even slightly disengaged people, I don't know that they're going to be offended by receiving an occasional email from the pastor, whether it's an emailed homily from Father, whether it's an emailed announcement of an upcoming event, carnival, festival, or an invitation to attend a ministry fair. I don't think those are particularly offensive, and they do work. They can be persuasive. It's a good format for communication. Are you actively emailing your parishioners now? Do you have a mechanism in place to capture email addresses wherever parishioners interact with you? Do you have a card that you distribute in your pews and ask people for their names and email addresses and explain to them why? That you're going to use it to help communicate. Do you ask for email addresses when people register? Do you gather email addresses on your website? Very easy to do that as well. We did a pretty good job some years ago gathering names and addresses. People asked for names and addresses so we could use the mail. For the same exact reasons, we need to do it for email. With email, you can engage parishioners on a wide variety of levels. You can communicate about parish activities. You can solicit sign-ups for envelopes, e-giving for ministries and communities, and you can promote registration and attendance for parish, schools, and community-wide events. If you gather in a 1,000-family parish 250, 300 email addresses, which should roughly correlate with the number of engaged people you have, hopefully more, you have a channel to help build out your activities at your parish, to help connect people to the different activities, to help facilitate their engagement. Whether it's, an invitation to an event or an invitation to register or an announcement that it's snowing and you're changing the mass schedule, you've created a channel, and an effective one, for good communication, which will help engagement. With email, you can engage parishioners on a lot of levels. You can educate, share homilies, talks, readings, videos. You can link people with your website and with other resources in the church. You can survey them, and you can network, promote social media opportunities. Hey, this is what's going on Facebook. This is what's happening over on our Instagram. Hey, if you've got young teenagers, they should be aware of the fact that we have a youth group here, and here's the Facebook link for the youth group. It's an effective way to communicate and deliver messages and list, sign up people. And that repeated itself. I apologize. Starting from scratch. How do you build an email database if you don't have one? Place cards, requesting email addresses in the pews at church, at the entrance, and at all gatherings. You need to actively get engaged in this. Gather email addresses wherever you gather data. New school registration, new church, school registrations, envelope lists, committees. Ask your ministries. I can guarantee you this: if you've got a good number of ministries at your parish, the people that are leading those ministries have asked their people for email addresses. They're not calling the 20 members of the men's prayer group to tell them that they're changing the schedule. They're emailing that. So they've got the 20 email addresses. Ask them. A little bit of effort, and you could build a very, very effective email distribution list. Promote email enrollment. Mention it during announcements and in the bulletin. They use banners, posters, and other promotional displays. Start small, but expect big results. Email doesn't have the buzz of social media, like Facebook or Twitter, but it has something neither of these do, which is virtually total acceptance and daily use. I know for a fact that everyone on this webinar uses email because you couldn't participate if you didn't. It has 100% acceptance. Almost everybody in your audience, in some way, shape, or form, is interacting with their email box. Your parishioners of all ages are using social media now and often. So we're jumping to social media. It's not just for the kids. You see the Facebook link there, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter. Social media are just that. They're social. They're interactive, community-driven, and engaging. Social media is visual as well as verbal, an ideal medium for incarnational sacramental church. I think this is an important message there. This is a visual medium as well. Facebook, I think, is the most widely accepted. I'm going to sort of speed along here a little bit. Is the most widely accepted, and I think people sometimes roll their eyes at Facebook or what have you, but it's an effective way of communicating with people if properly managed, if properly administered. I think it could work very, very well. Twitter and LinkedIn are capturing a fair amount of public attention. They're not nearly as popular or as effective yet as Facebook, but certainly teens and young adults are actively participating in them and in Instagram. It's easy to share content back and forth between Facebook and other services. Social media, a couple examples of social media pages. How do you begin? You need to launch a group. You don't want to set up a personal Facebook page for a church. That wouldn't work too well. So you launch a group, and here are a couple sample slides for groups. But examples of the kind of content that people are putting out over Facebook that I think really resonates. I mean, this is good messaging. This is these are daily readings. And your pastor could be communicating this in this voice. Your director of religious education could be communicating in this voice. It's not difficult to get a couple hundred people in Facebook. And some ideas about Facebook: allow comments but monitor them. Encourage parishioners to like or follow your page. You can build custom tabs to promote events. Post not 50 times a week, but 3, 4, 5, 7 times per week. Cross-link your posts to other social media accounts. Texting. Don't forget the mobile phone. It's highly used by parishioners of all ages. It's just not for kids. If this was a live audience, I would ask for a show of hands how many people have received a text so far today. And I've done this talk as early as 8 o'clock and had almost everybody in the room raise their hands. Most people are receiving a number of texts every day. With a church or any group, it needs to be an opt-in. But once you get people to opt in, and as long as you don't abuse it, 2, 3, 4 texts a month, it's an effective way to communicate with your parishioners. And it's a tool that should be available to help foster communication. Wouldn't be fair of me to give a talk and not talk a little bit about direct mail, given my background, but it works. It's a time-tested medium. There's a lot of ways to connect direct mail to social media and to online accounts. through Pearls and various other activities. It's more expensive, but it has the highest interaction and engagement rate. The number one direct mail user in the United States right now is Google. Here's a company that's entire business is built online, yet when it chooses to market itself to businesses in particular, it uses the mail to do it because it works. Then it'll work for you. It'll work for your parishes. It's a great way, it's a great tool for communication. You could really personalize it. You could really customize who you mail to and who the runs are. It's effective. It's an essential tool in a multi-channel effort. I don't know that I would do mail without connecting it to an email, without connecting it to Facebook and what have you. I think that all communication these days should take advantage of several different channels. Things that we're seeing parishes use direct mail for: evangelization cards, mailing newsletters, mailing annual reports, of course, requests for giving, invitation to events, parish surveys, time and talent materials, stewardship of treasure programs. I want to talk about the first three: evangelization postcards, newsletters, and annual reports. A good number of parishes are doing annual reports now and then just sort of posting them online. If an annual report is well built, it becomes a way to communicate, talking about goals. And when we counsel with parishes about annual reports, it's not just about how much money you brought in and what the balance sheet looks like. It's about how many people have been baptized and how many first communions and how many tons of food you had at the food pantry. It's a beautiful way of connecting your ministries and reporting on them, and it's a great engagement tool. Just sticking it in a PDF on your website isn't enough. We believe that it should be mailed. The same can be said for newsletter and evangelization postcard. I get a good number of postcards in my mailbox from some evangelical churches in my area that get my attention. They're beautiful, they're visually pleasing, they deliver a nice message in a mailbox filled with things that I don't necessarily want to read, and it breaks through the clutter. It costs some money, but it breaks through the clutter. It's a good interruption of my day, when I get some of these. Rarely does it ever come from a Catholic church. I'll run a little long, so let's wrap it up. Where are you now in terms of parishioner engagement? When you're speaking to an audience as diverse as what's on this call today, it's hard to know, and I'm going to guess that you folks took the time to participate. You guys are probably doing pretty well. It's all the people that didn't participate today that probably need to get this message as well. What parish communication opportunities for engagement are you missing? And then how will you begin engaging and or re-engaging parishioners right now? I hit you with a whole ton of information, but hopefully a takeaway or two, was presented here today. And we'll close it out the way we started. The church needs to be concerned for and present in the world of communication in order to dialogue with people today and to help them encounter Christ. She needs to be a church at the side of others, capable of accompanying everyone along the way. The revolution taking place in communications, media, and in information technologies represents a great and thrilling challenge. May we respond to that challenge with fresh energy and imagination as we seek to share with others the beauty of God. And certainly, that's as well said as it needs to be. And we hope everybody, today derives some value and, hopefully some ability to respond to the great and thrilling challenges that we as a church face. And, Cathedral certainly is available to help you, on any of those things, along the way. We participate at a lot of levels, in church communication, and we'll be glad to talk to you at some point. So this slide deck is going to be available. We have a process where we'll email out to you in the next couple of days, and it'll be available on video. And if I know what I'm doing here, anybody have any questions, comments? Was any of this of any good value? And if not, we'll see if any questions fill in here if I'm reading them properly. We'll just give it a second. But I thank you for participating. Thanks for sticking it out. Hopefully this was worth your time. We appreciate you spending the time with us today. And I think we'll be talking to all of you in the future. Thank you very much.